I have been working for Lawson Construction for 10 years now. The company was founded by my dad, Robert Lawson, 25 years ago. My younger brother, Jake, is 4 years younger than me, and he has always been the problem child. He rarely shows up to work, and when he does, he accomplishes nothing. I just finished the biggest project of our company, bringing in a $3 million contract that will secure our future for years. Dad promised me the vice president position as a reward. Then suddenly, he gave it to Jake instead of me. I could not believe my own father would betray me like this. Before I tell you how I faced this betrayal and built my own path to success, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe to follow my journey of building my own career after leaving the family business. The Lawson name means something in this city. For a quarter century, Lawson Construction has been synonymous with quality, reliability, and integrity in the building industry. I grew up watching my father Robert build this company from nothing, wearing a hard hat before I could even tie my own shoes. When I turned 22 and finished my civil engineering degree, there was never a question about where I would work. It was always going to be Lawson Construction. Dad never made it easy for me, though. I started at the bottom, working as a general laborer on job sites, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. My hands were calloused, and my back ached every night, but I never complained. I wanted to earn my place, not have it handed to me because I was the boss's son. Over the years, I worked my way up through the ranks foreman, site supervisor, project coordinator, and finally project manager. Each promotion was earned through sweat and determination. Jake was different. My younger brother always had everything handed to him on a silver platter. Mom and Dad sent him to an expensive private university where he got his MBA, but he dropped out in his final semester after a scandal involving plagiarism and cheating. Still, Dad welcomed him into the company with open arms, creating a special business development position that seemed to involve a lot of long lunches and very little actual work. Mom would have kept things balanced. Sarah Lawson was the heart of our family, the mediator who always made sure Dad did not play favorites. But we lost her to cancer 5 years ago, and things were never the same after that. Without her influence, Dad's favoritism toward Jake became more obvious. Still, I kept my head down and focused on my work, believing that results would speak for themselves. The Riverfront Heights project was my chance to prove my worth once and for all. This was not just another building job. It was a $30 million luxury complex that would transform the city's waterfront area. Landing this contract would put Lawson Construction in a whole new league. For 6 months, I worked 70 hours a week preparing the bid, studying architectural plans, researching materials, and creating detailed cost projections. Our main competition was Palmer Construction, a larger firm with more resources and connections. Their CEO, Howard Palmer, had political ties and a reputation for winning bids through relationships rather than merit. The odds were stacked against us, but I was determined to win this contract the right way. The day of the final presentation arrived. I had barely slept the night before, reviewing every detail of our proposal. The boardroom was intimidating, filled with executives in expensive suits and skeptical expressions. I felt my mouth go dry as I stood to present, but once I started talking about our vision for the project, everything clicked into place. I highlighted our company's history of on-time, on-budget projects, our commitment to sustainable building practices, and our detailed understanding of the site's unique challenges. When the questions came, I had solid answers. I could see the expressions changing from skepticism to interest. After the meeting, the lead developer pulled me aside. "That was impressive, Luis. You clearly know what you are talking about." 2 weeks later, we got the call. Lawson Construction had won the Riverfront Heights contract. The office erupted in celebration. Dad clapped me on the back, his eyes shining with pride for perhaps the first time in my life. "You did it, son," he said. This is the biggest thing that has ever happened to our company. When this project is completed, we will need to restructure the leadership. I am thinking it is time for you to step up as vice president." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. After years of working twice as hard to get half the recognition, my father was finally seeing my value. I spent that evening planning how I would help grow the company, the innovations I would implement, the new directions we could explore. For once, the future looked bright. But then things started to change. I noticed Jake suddenly taking an interest in the company. He started showing up to the office every day, something he had never done before. One evening, I stayed late to finish some paperwork and saw the light on in Dad's office. Through the glass door, I could see Jake and Dad talking intently, looking at documents spread across the desk. Jake was gesturing enthusiastically, and Dad was nodding along. A feeling of unease settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. I had earned my promotion fair and square. Dad had promised. That weekend, Dad invited us both to dinner at his house. The atmosphere was strangely tense, with Jake wearing an unusual smirk throughout the meal. Dad kept clearing his throat and avoiding eye contact with me. When I brought up the Riverfront Heights project, Dad quickly changed the subject to some new business strategy Jake had apparently suggested. I left that night with a knot in my stomach, a premonition that something was not right. The company-wide meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Everyone gathered in the conference room, excitement buzzing in the air. The Riverfront Heights contract was the biggest news in company history, and everyone was eager to hear about next steps. I sat in my usual spot, reviewing the project timeline I had prepared. Dad stood at the front of the room, looking more formal than usual in a pressed suit. "First, I want to thank everyone for their hard work in securing the Riverfront Heights contract. This is a monumental achievement for Lawson Construction." He paused, looking around the room. "As we take on this project and look to the future, I have been considering the leadership structure of our company. We need fresh perspectives and innovative thinking to take us to the next level." My heart raced with anticipation. This was it. My moment of recognition after years of dedication. I am pleased to announce that effective immediately, Jake Lawson will be stepping into the role of Vice President of Operations. The room went silent. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Surely I had misheard. I looked around at the confused faces of my colleagues, many of whom turned to me with expressions of sympathy and shock. Jake brings a fresh perspective with his MBA background. Dad continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the room. He has some exciting ideas for modernizing our approaches and expanding our market reach. Jake stood up, straightening his tie with a smug smile. "Thanks, Dad. I am honored by this opportunity and excited to lead Lawson Construction into a new era of growth and innovation." I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. The meeting continued, but I heard nothing. Blood rushed in my ears as I watched my brother, who had contributed virtually nothing to the company, accept the position that should have been mine. After the meeting, I marched straight to my father's office, closing the door behind me, perhaps a bit too forcefully. "What just happened?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "You promised me that position. I earned it. I brought in the biggest contract in company history." Dad sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Luis, you are an excellent project manager. Your attention to detail is unmatched. But leadership requires more than technical knowledge. It requires vision." Vision. Jake barely knows which end of a hammer to hold. He has been with the company for 3 years, and he shows up maybe twice a week. He has been sharing some impressive ideas about expanding our business model. Dad replied, defensively. "He sees the big picture in ways you do not. You get too caught up in the details, Luis. Details like making sure buildings do not collapse. Details like keeping our workers safe and our projects on budget. Those kinds of details." I could not keep the bitterness from my voice. Dad's expression hardened. I made my decision. Jake has the education and the fresh perspective we need. You should be grateful for all the opportunities this company has given you, instead of demanding more." I left his office, feeling like I had been talking to a stranger, not the father who raised me. The betrayal cut deep, not just because I had been passed over, but because Dad could not even acknowledge the blatant unfairness of his decision. Over the next few weeks, Jake wasted no time putting his vision into action. He hired 3 of his former college buddies into management positions, none of whom had any construction experience. He ordered new company cars, including a luxury SUV for himself. He had the main office redecorated at considerable expense. Meanwhile, I tried to focus on getting the Riverfront Heights project off the ground. Jake's leadership style quickly created problems. He spoke condescendingly to our veteran employees, people who had been with the company for decades. He implemented new reporting procedures that created unnecessary paperwork. Worst of all, he began cutting corners on safety protocols to speed up project timelines. 2 of our best foremen quit within a month. Diana, our financial manager who had been with the company for 15 years, came to me with concerns about irregular spending approvals. Carlos, our chief engineer, was frustrated that his expert recommendations were being ignored. I found myself working overtime not just on my assigned projects, but also quietly fixing Jake's mistakes behind the scenes. I did it for the sake of the company, for the employees who relied on Lawson Construction for their livelihoods, and for Dad, even though he had hurt me deeply. The real crisis began 3 months into the Riverfront Heights project. During the initial site assessment, Carlos and I had identified potential soil stability issues near the riverbank. We recommended additional foundational supports and drainage systems, adding about $200,000 to the budget. Jake rejected these unnecessary expenses without even consulting a geotechnical engineer. "We need to maximize profitability," he declared in a project meeting. "Those extra supports are just engineering overkill." I argued strenuously against this decision, even taking my concerns directly to Dad. But Jake had convinced him that I was being overly cautious, that my recommendations were just attempts to undermine Jake's authority. Dad told me to be a team player and follow the new leadership. Then came the heavy rains. For 2 weeks straight, water saturated the construction site. Without the additional drainage systems, we had recommended the soil beneath the southeastern corner of the foundation began to shift. One morning I arrived at the site to find part of the foundation cracked and sinking. Construction had to halt immediately. The client was furious. The project was now facing significant delays and additional costs. They threatened to cancel the contract entirely and sue for breach. The reputation that Lawson Construction had built over 25 years was on the verge of collapse along with our building foundation. Dad called an emergency meeting of the senior leadership team. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. For the first time, Robert Lawson looked his age, the lines in his face deeper than I had ever seen them. Jake sat next to him, his usual swagger replaced by nervous fidgeting. "We are facing a serious situation," Dad began his voice, lacking its usual confidence. "The client is threatening litigation over the foundation issues at Riverfront Heights. We need solutions, and we need them fast." All eyes turned to Jake, who cleared his throat awkwardly. "These things happen in construction." The rainfall was exceptional, almost record-breaking. No one could have predicted it. Carlos, our chief engineer, could not contain himself. With all due respect, we did predict it. Luis and I specifically warned about soil instability in that exact area. We recommended additional foundational supports that would have prevented this entire situation. Jake's face reddened. Those were theoretical concerns. The added expense was not justified based on the information we had at the time. I pulled out the site assessment report from my folder and placed it on the table. "This is not theoretical. This is the detailed geotechnical analysis we conducted. It clearly shows the risk factors and our recommended mitigation measures, all of which were dismissed without proper consultation." Dad looked at the report then, at Jake, confusion and disappointment crossing his face. Why was I not shown this? Before Jake could answer Diana, our financial manager spoke up. There is more, Mr. Lawson. I have identified some concerning financial discrepancies in the project budget. Funds allocated for quality control measures have been diverted to other expenses. Jake stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous. You are all trying to sabotage me because you are jealous of my position, and Luis put you up to this. Did not. He has been undermining me from day one because he wanted my job. The accusation hung in the air for a moment before I responded, my voice steady, despite the anger boiling inside me. I have dedicated 10 years of my life to this company. I have worked on site, in freezing cold and blistering heat. I have missed holidays, birthdays, and vacations to ensure our projects succeed. Everything I have ever done has been for the good of Lawson Construction. I turned to face my father directly. But there is something else you should know. Jake has not just been cutting corners on safety. He has been skimming from the project budget. The room went completely silent. Jake's face drained of color. I continued pulling out more documents. These are copies of invoices for materials that were never delivered to the site, and these are approvals for consultant fees to companies that do not exist, all authorized by Jake. Dad looked shocked, turning to Jake with disbelief. Is this true? Jake's composure cracked entirely. You never appreciated anything I did. Luis was always the golden boy, the perfect son who could do no wrong. I just wanted to prove I could be successful too. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Dad sat there looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen him. The room slowly emptied until only he and I remained. Luis the first, he began but seemed unable to find the words. I gathered my documents silently, emotions warring inside me. Part of me wanted to comfort my father, to tell him we would find a way through this crisis. Another part, the wounded son who had been betrayed by his own father, wanted him to suffer the consequences of his poor judgment. That night I faced the most difficult decision of my life. Should I stay and help salvage the company my father had built, or was it time to walk away and forge my own path? I barely slept, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that was at stake. I remembered a conversation with my mother before she passed away. Promise me you will always take care of the family, Luis, she had said, holding my hand from her hospital bed. At the time, I had assumed she meant supporting Dad and Jake after she was gone. But now I wondered if there was another interpretation. Perhaps taking care of the family sometimes meant making the hard choices even when they hurt. In the early hours of the morning, I made my decision. It was time to leave Lawson Construction. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared for my departure professionally and thoroughly. I documented all ongoing projects, prepared transition notes, and met with my team to explain the situation. I did not want the company to suffer any more than it already had, despite everything that had happened. Before submitting my resignation, I scheduled meetings with our major clients, including the Riverfront Heights developers. I did not badmouth the company or my family, but I was honest about the challenges and my decision to leave. To my surprise, several clients expressed concern about continuing with Lawson Construction without my involvement. Harold Matthews, the lead developer for Riverfront Heights, pulled me aside after our meeting. Luis, you are the reason we chose Lawson in the first place. Your expertise and integrity made the difference. If you are starting your own venture, we would be interested in discussing options. When I finally handed my resignation letter to my father, he did not seem surprised, just sad. I suppose I should have seen this coming, he said quietly. Where will you go? I am starting my own company, I told him. Integrity Construction. He winced slightly at the name, understanding the implicit criticism. And you think you can succeed where Lawson is struggling? I know I can build a company based on the values you taught me when I was young, I replied. Quality work, honesty, treating people with respect. I have always respected you, Luis, he said defensively. No, Dad. Respect means recognizing merit and contribution. It means keeping your promises. It means listening when someone warns you about serious problems instead of dismissing them. I took a deep breath. I am not angry anymore. I am just disappointed, and I need to move forward. He stood up suddenly. So that is it. After everything I have done for you, you are just going to walk away when things get tough. I stayed and fought for 10 years, Dad. I am not walking away from tough times. I am walking towards something better. With that, I left his office for the last time. Starting Integrity Construction was harder than I had anticipated. I rented a small office space downtown, using most of my savings to secure basic equipment and insurance. I had no employees, no projects, and a mountain of paperwork to establish the new business. What I did have, however, was reputation and relationships. Within a week, Carlos, our former chief engineer, called to ask if I had a position available. Diana, our financial manager, followed soon after. By the end of the month, I had a small but highly qualified team of former Lawson employees who believed in my vision. Our first contract came from Harold Matthews and the Riverfront Heights Development, who terminated their agreement with Lawson Construction and hired Integrity to take over the project, starting with fixing the foundation issues. It was a smaller contract than the original, but it was a start, and it came with the promise of future work if we delivered. We operated on a shoestring budget those first few months. Our office furniture was secondhand. We shared vehicles and equipment. Everyone worked long hours for less pay than they were worth, but there was something special happening. We were building not just structures, but a company culture based on mutual respect and shared values. Meanwhile, news about Lawson Construction's troubles spread through the industry. They lost several major contracts. Their bank reduced their credit line. Suppliers began demanding payment up front due to rumors of financial instability. 6 months after I left, I received a call from Frank Anderson, my father's oldest friend and the company's legal counsel. Lawson Construction is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, he told me. Jake resigned last month. Apparently, he is in Europe somewhere. Your father, he is not doing well, Luis. I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication, sadness, concern. Despite everything, Robert Lawson was still my father. A week later, he showed up at my office unannounced. He looked thinner, the confident businessman replaced by a humbled man with shadows under his eyes. You were right, he said simply. About everything. Jake, the foundation issues all of it. I should have listened to you. I should have kept my promise. I offered him a seat and a cup of coffee. Why did not you? I have wondered that for months. Was it because you thought Jake needed the opportunity more than I did? Dad stared into his coffee cup. Partly. Jake always struggled, and you always succeeded. But mostly, it was my own ego. Jake told me what I wanted to hear. He had grand plans for expanding the company, making the Lawson name even bigger. You were more cautious, more focused on doing things right than doing things big. I mistook that for lack of ambition. And now the company is bankrupt, I said quietly. Yes. The company I spent my life building is falling apart. He looked up at me, his eyes watery. I do not expect you to come back, but I could use your advice on how to move forward if you are willing to give it. I did not agree to return to Lawson Construction, but I did agree to help my father develop a restructuring plan. We met weekly to discuss options for saving what could be saved of the company. These meetings were sometimes tense, sometimes productive, but always honest in a way. Our relationship had not been for years. In the meantime, Integrity Construction thrived. We completed the Riverfront Heights foundation repairs, on time and under budget. Word spread about our quality work and ethical business practices. By the end of our first year, we had 15 employees and a solid portfolio of projects. The most valuable lesson I learned through this ordeal was not about construction or business management. It was about self-worth and integrity. For years, I had sought validation from my father, measuring my success by his recognition. When that recognition was unfairly denied, I discovered something important. My value did not come from his approval. It came from knowing I had done my best, treated people fairly, and stood by my principles even when it was difficult. I also learned about forgiveness. Not the kind that pretends wrongs never happened, but the kind that acknowledges hurt while choosing to move forward without bitterness. My relationship with my father is different now. More honest, more equal. He consults me on business decisions, and I value his experience and perspective. Last week, I received an email from him proposing a collaboration between our companies on a new community center project. Lawson Construction, much smaller now, but rebuilt on sounder principles, would handle the structural work. Integrity Construction would manage the project and do the finishing work. It would be the first time we worked together as equals rather than as boss and employee, father and son. I have not given him an answer yet. Part of me is cautious, remembering the past, but another part sees this as an opportunity for both healing and good business. After all, integrity is not just about standing your ground. Sometimes it is about building bridges where bridges need to be built. Has someone in your life ever taken credit for your work or denied you an opportunity you deserved? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the first step towards something better. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is not determined by others' recognition, but by the integrity with which you live your life.